let us go back about 300 years to the London of Samuel Pepys. In his famous diary, we read of a catastrophe that was typical of that and of the preceding ages. An epidemic of the plague that had been raging in Europe broke out with a fearful frenzy in England's capital in 1665. Hundreds fell ill every day. Many of them died in short order. People were stricken on the streets. Everyone fled from the victims for fear of the dread disease. But by far the most horrible element of the tragedy was the mystery of its origin. No one knew what or who carried the plague. The solution finally came by way of this odd little contraption. Does anyone know what this is?
It looks like a can opener.
No, it isn't a can opener. It's the first microscope. It may look like a toy to us, but its importance to human life is tremendous. It's the connecting link between our science and the distant past, when the world of germs was unknown to man. In 1683, not very long after the London calamity, Antonius von Leeuwenhoek ground a lens superior to any magnifying glass of that day. This Dutch naturalist set this lens into a crude frame and thus constructed this first microscope. He examined drinking water. Imagine the astonishment of his friends when he showed them tiny animals swimming around in the fluid. He even examined the scurf of the teeth and found living beings too small to be seen with the naked eye. This was man's first sight of the millions of tiny germs with which he comes in contact every day. Leeuwenhoek had opened a new world but did not appreciate the importance of his discovery. In the following century, many scientists studied these germs. In 1762, Plenzies, a Viennese doctor, contended that many diseases were caused by these invisible living things. But no one wanted to hear about the visions of a dreamer. The medical men of the time demanded facts, and Plenzies had no proofs. Science was still waiting for the great genius of the microscope. It took 100 years to find him, but when he came, he revolutionized the entire field of medicine. Since 1860, all advances in the work with germs have been based on the fundamental experiments of Louis Pasteur. This great Frenchman established that germs did not, as was popularly believed, come to life by themselves. By an ingenious test, he proved that germs would not develop in a germ-free flask unless they were carried there by dust particles or some other means. He next used the microscope to help the great wine industry of France. He recognized the fact that yeast cells cause fermentation, but that very often other organisms ruin the beverages. Pasteur experimented and found he could kill the organisms with heat. The first of the methods discovered for killing germs. This may be demonstrated by placing an active culture of bacteria under the microscope, applying heat, and then observing the germs forming in clusters as they die. This use of heat, as in pasteurization, is today vital in safeguarding many of our foods, particularly milk. Disease germs, if present, are eliminated by passing the milk over heated coils, so that when it is finally served, it should contain nothing but the nourishing qualities that ensure good health. In England, Dr. Lister, who had been carefully studying the work of Pasteur, conceived the idea that germs might be responsible for the pus infection of wounds. In those days, a surgical operation was a gamble with death from blood poisoning. Lister found that he could avert this by killing the germs in and around the wound. He sprayed everything with carbolic and bathed his instruments with the same chemical solution. He destroyed the germs with chemicals just as Pasteur had done with heat. This was the second of the methods discovered for killing germs. The modern antiseptic and aseptic methods of surgery are the outgrowth of Lister's early ideas. Throughout France, the sheep were dying in large numbers of the disease known as anthrax. The great Pasteur found that germs were responsible for this scourge and pointed out methods for destroying them. He also prepared a vaccine that enabled the sheep to resist an attack by the anthrax germ. Thus, Pasteur discovered the third method for combating germs, that is, by biological action, as with vaccines and antitoxins. It was by means of this third method that he achieved the crowning glory of his brilliant career, the successful fight against rabies or hydrophobia. This humble chemist became the founder of modern scientific medicine and one of the greatest benefactors of the human race. Pasteur's successful experiments fixed the position of the microscope in scientific medical investigation. In the next 50 years, more progress was made in medicine than in the previous 2,000 years. It is hard to believe that as late as 1832, New York was at the almost complete mercy of many infectious diseases such as cholera, diphtheria, and smallpox, although vaccination then as now would have wiped out this latter disease. The New York Post of June the 16th, 1832, carries the story of an epidemic of Asiatic cholera that had broken out in Canada. It would reach New York shortly, and nothing could be done to stop it. The epidemic did arrive, and later spread its fearful hand over Europe as well. Not until 1883 did Robert Koch discover the germ that caused cholera. In the preceding year, Koch had found the germ responsible for tuberculosis. Later, the typhoid germ was revealed by two German scientists, Dr. Ebert and Dr. Gefke. And in 1883, Dr. Krebs discovered the germ that caused diphtheria. But the real fight against this merciless diphtheria germ was yet to be won. On Christmas Eve, 1891, in the von Bergmann Hospital in Berlin, a little girl was fighting for her life against this murderous disease. One ray of hope lay in the skill and genius of Dr. von Behring, a former military surgeon who had been making remarkable experiments under Dr. Koch. He had successfully cured diphtheria in animals by means of an antitoxin. With the courage and daring of a great scientist, he was now ready to take the eventful step from the laboratory to the sickbed. He brought his wonderful serum to the aid of the stricken child. In a minute, the famous injection had been completed, and the contribution von Behring made to humanity that Christmas Eve will remain an everlasting symbol of his goodwill to men. Once again, man had conquered germs by the third method of combat, by biological activity. Von Behring's achievement was great, but he saw that better than to cure the disease would be to prevent it. This ideal has now been achieved, and today we have toxin-antitoxin or toxoid with which we are able to protect our children against diphtheria. Modern children are proud to receive this treatment, which provides a shield against this disease. But not all of these infinitesimal germs disclosed by the modern microscope are injurious to man. Some, in fact, are essential to his very life. They live in the soil, make it possible for us to grow the fruits, grains, and vegetation so necessary to the existence of animals and mankind. But the injurious germs, and indeed the causes of those diseases not due to germs, must be discovered, controlled, and if possible, destroyed. Many of these causes have come to be known in the last 50 years, but there are others that still elude the searching eye of modern science. The cause and cure for infantile paralysis, rheumatic fever, and for cancer are among the baffling mysteries yet to be solved. But there is every reason to believe that the scientists will be successful in the future. Year after year, they struggle unrelentingly, sometimes sacrificing their own lives to find new ways of controlling disease. They are fighting the battle of man against microbe, so that we, unhampered by the scourge of sickness, may achieve fullness of life and happiness.